Paris, France, 1992. Two friends named Guy Manuel de Homem Cristo and Thomas Bangalter decided to form a band. Homem Cristo would play guitar and Bangalter would play bass. They recruited Laurent Ronkovitz to join them on drums. They named themselves Darlin after a Beach Boys song. Darlin quickly got noticed by the record label Duophonic Records, a label owned by the band Stereolab. Duophonic hooked them up with some shows and recorded some of their songs. On May 1st, 1993, Melody Maker published a review of two of their songs that referred to it as, quote, Daft Punky Thrash. Well, Darlin broke up soon after this, but Homem Cristo and Bangalter would go on to create a new group called Daft Punk. Yep, inspired by that review. By that time, Homem Cristo and Bangalter had become heavily influenced by raves, or dance parties, usually held in big venues that feature DJs playing electronic dance music, or EDM. And yeah, often at these raves, there'd be a lot of people on drugs. Anyway, Homem Cristo and Bangalter were amazed at how many people attending raves really got into this dance music despite never hearing it before. Based on this, the two decided that Daft Punk would create music using only electronic instruments. By the way, Ronkovitz would go on to form another band called Phoenix, which eventually also became a big deal. But back to Daft Punk. During the summer of 1993, Homem Cristo and Bangalter began recording EDM stuff in Bangalter's bedroom at his parents' apartment. In September, they attended a rave at what's now Disneyland Paris, in which they had the opportunity to meet the producer Stuart McMillan of the group Slam. The boys gave Stuart a demo tape, and yep, sure enough, Stuart really dug it. He just so happened to have a record label called Soma Quality Recordings and agreed to release Daft Punk's first single, The New Wave. The song wasn't able to gain any traction though, and so Homem Cristo and Bangalter kept recording. Now influenced by American gangsta rap and gangsta funk, they continue to record in Bangalter's bedroom. Soma Quality Recordings was especially excited about an electro song the boys recorded called Da Funk. Soma released Da Funk on May 8th, 1995, but hardly anyone noticed. That is, until the popular electronic duo, the Chemical Brothers, began including it into their live shows. Soon, BBC Radio 1's Annie Nightingale was playing it. The song would eventually become a major dance hit around the world, even topping the Billboard Dance Club Songs chart in the United States. Rolling Stone magazine later called Da Funk one of the greatest dance songs of all time. By 1996, Homem Cristo and Bangalter were now regularly performing and had hired a manager, Pedro Winter, a law student who happened to be a DJ and producer himself. Daft Punk was now in a bidding war, getting multiple offers from record labels, but Homem Cristo and Bangalter were hesitant to sign any deals because they feared losing creative control. In September 1996, they finally signed a generous deal with Virgin Records that allowed them to maintain much autonomy. By that time, Daft Punk had recorded a bunch more songs. One criticism some folks have of house music, or EDM in general, is that the beats can be repetitive. Well, these songs didn't have that problem. Homem Cristo and Bangalter assembled them in a way that made them exciting. They added catchy soul melodies, funky bass lines, weird sounds and textures. They blended a bunch of different genres, from disco to rock to acid to R&B to even industrial. Of course, there were samples, but Homem Cristo and Bangalter also added their own voices to some of the songs. Of course, they heavily processed their vocals through talk boxes and vocoders, making them sound like robots, which, as it turns out, later became a big part of their distinct sound. They decided to call their debut album album Homework to reflect the fact that they somewhat hastily recorded the songs on it at home. Virgin released Homework on January 20th, 1997. Shortly after its release, the UK dance magazine Music described Homework as, quote, one of the most hyped debut albums in a long, long time. Indeed, critics praised it, and it lived up to the hype, becoming a major hit across Europe. It peaked at number 3 on the French albums chart, but charted in 13 other countries, eventually selling more than 2 million copies worldwide. Homework featured 5 singles: the aforementioned Daft Punk, Indo Silver Club, Around the World, Burnin', and Revolution 909. All except Indo Silver Club were big hits in dance clubs around the world. Hey, speaking of around the world was particularly popular, even topping some pop charts and getting major airplay on radio stations and even MTV. Today, Around the World is their 5th most streamed song on Spotify. And hey, speaking of MTV, their music videos were equally as memorable as the songs themselves, like the Spike Jonze directed video for Daft Punk, which featured a dog walking around New York City with a boombox, or the video for Revolution 909, a critique on the moral panic surrounding rave culture, or the video for Burnin', a tribute to the early house music scene of Chicago in the 1980s. Homework was undoubtedly a landmark album that brought electronic music to a much broader audience. And indeed, Homework made O Mem Cristo and Von Galter famous, which they were never comfortable with. The two began to worry that folks were focusing too much on them, not the music itself. In response to this, they began wearing masks on stage and in photo shoots. That said, they still were on stage a lot, performing at least 75 shows in 1997 alone, all around the world. In 1998, O Mem Cristo and Von Galter worked on some solo projects. By the end of the year, though, they reunited to record new stuff at Von Galter's home in Paris. They got more experimental and tried really hard to not just make dance music, trying to recapture the joy and wonder of the music they loved as kids. And then they became robots. On September 9th, 1999, they were recording stuff when their sampler crashed and exploded, knocking them unconscious. They awoke to a doctor telling them that they had become part robots. Their brains and hearts were still there, but the rest of their bodies was now a machine. Okay, so obviously the story is made up, but it became a fun way to mess with the media when they began adopting robots' personas at performances and in photo shoots. These robot personas not only gave them some privacy and helped let their music stand on its own, but they also became part of their brand from here on out. Virgin released Discovery, Daft Punk's second studio album, on March 12th, 2001. Discovery dramatically redefined what electronic music could be, shifting from club-focused house music to emotionally driven disco and funk. Yes, it was retro and featured a bunch of samples, but it also strangely felt like the future. O Mem Cristo and Von Galter even collaborated with Lichi Matsumoto to produce an anime film to complement the album. Critics also generally adored Discovery, and it was an even bigger hit than Homework, eventually selling nearly 3 million copies worldwide. Discovery was so influential that for the next 10 years, many pop producers were at least somewhat borrowing some of the methods O Mem Cristo and Von Galter used to record this album. The album featured 6 singles: Aerodynamic, Digital Love, Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, Face to Face, Something About Us, and One More Time, which became a huge hit for the duo. One More Time, which featured Roman Tony on vocals, marked the start of Daft Punk regularly collaborating with other singers for their songs. The song topped many pop charts around the world, and today is considered one of the greatest songs of all time. It's their second most streamed song on Spotify, Spotify. Digital Love and Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger both were radio hits as well, and continue to do well, I should add. Face to Face features 20 different samples, and fans to this day are still using AI tools to figure out where all these samples came from. Discovery is often considered Daft Punk's best album, often making greatest albums of all time lists. Interestingly, Daft Punk didn't do much to promote Discovery. In the 4 years after its release, the duo only played 2 live performances. During this 4-year period, Virgin released a live album by them called Alive 1997 and a remix album called Daft Club, but other than that, Omem Cristo and Bangalter were more popular than ever, but nowhere to be found. Flash forward to March 14th, 2005, and Virgin seemingly suddenly releases their 3rd studio album, Human After All. While it took Daft Punk 2 years to record Discovery, it only took 6 weeks to record Human After All, again recorded at Bangalter's home in Paris. All that they apparently used were 2 guitars, a drum machine, and an 8-track recorder. Oh, and a vocoder, of course. Critics and fans alike were more mixed about Human After All, with some frustrated at how repetitive it was compared to their previous 2 albums. It was certainly more dark, minimalistic, spontaneous, and raw than their previous stuff. Despite mixed reactions, Human After All reached #1 on the Billboard Dance Electronic Albums chart and got nominated for a Grammy. It featured 4 singles: Robot Rock, Technologic, The Prime Time of Your Life, and the title track. None were that big of hits though, and to this day Human After All is Daft Punk's worst selling studio album. But then, another big moment in Daft Punk history. Their memorable performance at Coachella 2006. Spin magazine reported that it was a, quote, tipping point for EDM, introducing the duo to a much younger crowd that had previously been more used to seeing rock bands. Human After All, as it turns out, became a gateway album for many of these rock kids who had never before even considered listening to electronic music. Also in 2006, the duo released a film called Daft Punk's Electroma. It's about 2 robots trying to become human. I should say they had made other films before, but interestingly, this was the first one not to feature their own music. In the following months, Daft Punk would play many more big shows like Coachella that further broadened their appeal. One of those shows, which took place on June 14th, 2007 at this beautiful arena in Paris, became so legendary that Virgin released it as their 2nd live album, Alive 2007. Their performance of Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger on the album earned them their first Grammy. They even performed it at the ceremony. This song had renewed interest after the rapper and producer Kanye West sampled it. Around that time, Disney reached out to Omem Cristo and Bangalter to see if they could produce an original score for a sequel to the film Tron. While hesitant at first, working with one of the biggest media corporations to ever exist, the duo came around, seeing it as a fun challenge. Daft Punk ended up recording 24 songs that would make up the soundtrack for Tron Legacy. While the movie itself got mixed reviews, critics generally praised Daft Punk's music. It featured the minor hit Derezed. In the 2010s, Daft Punk's legendary status only grew. Everyone seemingly wanted to work with them. Still, the duo mostly kept a low profile, so much that when they did make public appearances, like when they joined their old bandmate Laurent Bronkovitz and his band Phoenix on stage, fans freaked out. Meanwhile, they kept recording, hoping to release a long-awaited 4th album. But now, instead of seeking out samples, they were seeking out musicians to collaborate with. Among those they recorded with were Paul Williams, Nile Rodgers, Giorgio Moroder, Julian Casablancas, Panda Bear, and Pharrell Williams. Omem Cristo and Bangalter ditched the digital for the analog. They embraced progressive rock and jazz. What resulted ended up becoming their final studio album, Random Access Memories, released by Columbia Records on May 17th, 2013. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you that by this time, Daft Punk had ditched Virgin for Columbia. Random Access Memories Memories was Daft Punk's most commercially successful and critically acclaimed album yet. It won 5 Grammys and eventually sold more than 4 million copies. The lead single, Get Lucky, a collaboration with the aforementioned Nile Rodgers and Pharrell Williams, got to the top of the charts in several countries and is currently their most streamed song of all time, with, dang, more than 1.2 billion streams so far on Spotify alone. Daft Punk's other collaboration with Williams and Rodgers, Lose Yourself to Dance, was another big hit. Random Access Memories also featured the hits Doing It Right, Instant Crush, and Give Life Back to Music. It's another Daft Punk masterpiece, often considered one of the greatest albums of all time. Despite being more artistically ambitious, Random Access Memories became their most mainstream album yet. Yep, a famous electronic duo became most famous when they were the least electronic. What a weird world we live in. Daft Punk would go on to play just 6 shows over the next 7 years after Random Access Memories temporarily put the duo back in the spotlight. They'd return to a much preferred low profile. That said, they'd continue to collaborate with some big names, notably The Weeknd. Jump ahead to February 22nd, 2021, and Daft Punk released this video, ostensibly announcing the end of Daft Punk in the most artistic way possible. The duo gave no reason why Daft Punk was ending, but their publicist confirmed that it was over, and they went out on their own terms. Still, at the peak of their popularity. Always mysterious as human beings, the world got to know Daft Punk as robots, but boy did those robots seem like human beings. Don't get it twisted, the elaborate robot costumes weren't a gimmick. They gave Daft Punk the freedom to create whatever the heck they wanted to. Seeing them forced the listener to separate the artist from the music. Perhaps due to this separation, Daft Punk was able to push the boundaries of electronic music further than their contemporaries, especially with their live performances. Despite releasing just 4 studio albums, Daft Punk helped EDM become mainstream. Their innovative approach to electronic music and their ability to combine a diverse range of genres have left a lasting impact on the music industry. To me, the most fascinating part of their legacy is the fact that because they have transcended genres, generations, and cultures so much, it's hard to stereotype the average Daft Punk listener these days. They have brought so many different types of people together. In fact, the typical Daft Punk fan is so hard to pin down that they might as well be wearing a robot costume. So, what's your favorite Daft Punk song? What about favorite album? Yeah, it's definitely difficult to pick just one, but I think my favorite song by them is probably still Face to Face. And my favorite album is Random Access Memories, which came out 12 years ago. Holy crap, that one stood the test of time well, I must say. Anyway, let me know which musicians you'd like for me to cover next, and thank you for watching or listening.